to not waste too much time, I'll just officially start while we're still welcoming people into the room because we have a wonderful webinar ahead of us, a short one, but a very good one, I would say, not to brag. Welcome, good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you're joining us from, and welcome to our webinar titled Prioritizing Abstinence-Based Prevention, Regulation and Recovery to Reduce Substance-Related Harm and Promote Mental Health and Population Level. We're so glad that you're joining us here today. Please introduce yourself in the chat where you're joining us from and introduce your organization and maybe even your connection to prevention or abstinence-based prevention even. It's an honor to moderate this timely discussion, and it's hosted by WFAD, who I'm representing today, Delgarno Institute, and MPC, on the importance of abstinence-based prevention, which is not just a strategy for individual behavior change, but as a powerful yet often overlooked and even underfunded public health approach that has proven effective in reducing substance-related harm and enhancing mental health across the lifespan. Throughout our early webinars on prevention in October and November recently, we emphasized the key message. Prevention begins early, long before substance use behaviors emerge, and sometimes even before birth, when a baby is still in the womb. We explored how early life environments, stress exposures, and family well-being can influence the future vulnerabilities to substance use and mental health challenges. And this life course perspective highlights that prevention isn't one-time intervention. It's an ongoing process shaped by the family, school, community, and most importantly, peers. Today's research builds on this message, showing that abstinence-based prevention, when integrated into broader regulatory and recovery frameworks, can reduce substance use at a population level and bring measurable health benefits, including improved brain development, stronger mental resilience, healthier behavioral patterns, and long-term protection against addiction and mental illness. What makes abstinence-based prevention powerful is that it strengthens protective factors rather than simply reacting to risks. When young people grow up in environments where supportive relationships, positive role models, clear boundaries, and healthy coping skills are present, risks don't just get managed, they often don't get a chance to grow. And the evidence presented today from Australia and the US shows that introducing abstinence-based policies and programs has led to significant and sustained reductions in adolescent substance use, with positive ripple effects throughout and through adulthood. But these benefits are at times disrupted when prevention efforts are overshadowed by fragmented treatment systems or conflicting harm reduction messaging. And this webinar explores how aligning regulation, prevention, and recovery can maximize impact for both mental health and substance-related harm reduction. We are privileged to be joined by two of the authors of the featured commentary, one of whom has successfully implemented many abstinence-based prevention activities on the ground. And we're also joined by a partner organization that will share their best practice program and experience. So thank you again for joining us here today. And it's my honor to present the first speaker of today, Shane Varcoe. He is currently the Executive Director of the Delgarno Institute for over 15 years and has created and launched the internationally trademarked World Resilience Day Week. And in 2024, created and launched a Necessary Harm podcast and our demand reduction prevention and recovery focused news platform, We Are the News. He's also authored a number of papers, studies, and books, including today's paper. Shane, thank you so much for joining us here today, and the floor is yours.
Absolute privilege to be here. Thank you for joining us various times of day and night, and it's a real privilege to be able to present this very important work in a very snapshot kind of way. Now, we've titled this for a little bit of provocation, "Oh no, not the A word." One thing about the Delgarno Institute is it's been around a very, very long time. It's one of the longest standing health education charities in our country, rocking over 150 plus years. And our motto is 150 years of minimizing harm by maximizing prevention, and we're a proto-abstinence movement. Now that's a very important distinction because a lot of policy and a lot of regulatory frameworks have never really had this in the last probably 20 to 30 years. But prior to that, it was very much a consistent part of all policy frameworks. And we've got a long history in this space, and it's a fascinating phenomena to watch this re-emerge as a key protective factor in what we're doing. As it's been introduced by Cressida, I'm not going to repeat all that. And we're not going to spend a lot of time waffling on about our organisation and what it does, but I'll introduce our next speaker a little bit later on, and he'll be able to speak into the important institutions he's involved with. But this particular paper, it was a long time coming, and we obviously there's itself, John Toumbourou, which we'll speak to in a moment. But this, from the abstract, I just want to read it again, a little bit from the abstract. This commentary argues the need to prioritise regulation. Sorry, so is there what I'm doing here? Regulation and abstinence-based prevention and recovery as critical services in efforts to maximise the reduction of substance-related harm and the promotion of mental health at a population level, as Cressida emphasised, which seek to reduce the development of these problems. Outlines the argument to maximise substance use intervention effectiveness and mental health promotion by increasing investment in abstinence-based substance use regulation and prevention, and then restructuring treatment and recovery services to more deliberately integrate with this emphasis. Now, here it is. Here's the big statement. You're kidding, right? Why abstinence? That's a bridge too far. Now, the reason we put it up there, because this is a counterweight that we continually contend with, particularly in our organisation. And for the last 15, 16 years, I've been involved with the Delgado Institute. This has been a real point of, or not just resistance, but of mockery. And I'm just wondering, with just a bit of a vox pop on that statement, the bridge too far statement, because a lot of people think the idea of putting or positing abstinence back into the public square, and particularly in a policy framework, is kind of a bridge too far. So a bit of a quick vox pop out there with your little participation. What's the word I'm looking for, Cressida? The little icons. I want you to be honest. Firstly, hands up in the chat. How many people actually thought that was a bridge too far issue? That bridge too far issue, or something like that was in their heads. So I want you to be honest. Put it in the chat. Just put your hands up. Yep, I thought. Yeah, this is kind of like a little bit too much. Anybody put their? Let's have a look. No one's going to be judged. No one's going to be given a hard time. Interesting. Excellent. So we're not seeing a lot of hands, which is really good. So it's not a bridge too far for a lot of people. So that's really important, because one of the things that we continue to encounter in this, particularly in Australia, and is in this policy framework, is the idea that we can actually put this vital protective factor from, as stated in our Isabella's List platform, from conception to the grave. Now, this is an incredibly important protective factor that's been essentially erased from the public square by a lot of actors. And part of the reason for this paper was to reintroduce this very powerful mechanism back in. So a quick poll here, and you can answer in the chat again for those who are feeling energetic. So a couple of questions that I want you to answer in the chat, or even just for your own record. This is what we call context calibration. And the reason we do this in seminars with students, with adults, with sporting clubs, with community groups, whoever we're with, at times when we need to go into a space where they have been entrenched in a particular narrative, and that narrative has shaped and informed the way they see things. And in Australia, we've our national drug strategy, which is a harm minimisation strategy, which has 3 pillars. First priority pillar is demand reduction. First and foremost, right? Prevention, demand reduction. Second is supply reduction. They go hand in hand. And third and last is the harm reduction vehicle, which is supposed to help those caught in the tyranny of addiction stay alive whilst they exit drug use. Now, what's happened in the last 15 years, 20 years, is that certain policy strategists and policy interpreters have taken harm reduction and they've interchanged harm minimization and harm reduction. And harm reduction has taken on a whole new life, where now harm reduction is even seen as a prevention mechanism. So what's happened is the narrative has shifted so far that prevention and demand reduction have been assailed, if you like, and their capacity to be a priority has been weakened, not because they're not important and not because they're not stated, but because they've been not used effectively. And as Chris mentioned in the introduction, that's not what's been happening. But what's worse is that over that period of time, the context has actually shaped the way people think. And conversations I have regularly with people in the sector, youth workers, nurses, practitioners, clinicians, they're so enmeshed and so entrenched in harm reduction ideology that the idea of prevention has kind of been losing weight, and the absolute idea of abstinence is almost impossible. So that's why we have these context calibration sessions. So again, for your own notes, if you like, we can put them in the chat if you want to. So the genuine questions we want answers to: how much substance, licit or illicit, is good for the developing brain? So you can make a note of that in the chat or in your own notes. It's your call. So again, the question: how much substance, licit or illicit, is good for the developing brain? That's the first question. So I'll give you another 10 seconds to answer. Second question: when it comes to substance use, what is best practice for the developing brain? I'll repeat the question. When it comes to substance use, what is best practice for the developing brain? Not complex questions, but important ones to answer. Again, in the chat or your own notes, your call. And the last question is kind of a bit of a two-parter, but it's more of a yes-no answer. The question is, who here on this webinar believes our children or grandchildren, sorry, I should say all grandchildren, will be better off with substance use or better off with easier access to drugs? Do you think they will, yes, or do you think they will, no? Okay. Anybody want to venture an answer? You can talk or in the chat. You can see the chat, Cressida.
Yeah, I myself wrote in it. I don't think any of it is good. Like I wrote myself, like the first question is none, second question is to avoid it, and third question is no.
Correct. Yeah, it's the reason we do this again, because when you put the question in the right place at the right time, what it does is gets people to rethink a position or an idea that may well and truly have been entrenched in their thinking. And I'm laboring this point for a reason, because we want people to really start to understand that the political will to do this and the political will to have this in play is based on good research and evidence we have, but it relies heavily on the zeitgeist, the spirit of the people involved in it. So it's really important that we actually catch this and buy into the notion that this is not just a reasonable idea, but this is in fact best practice moving forward. So it's very important. Just going to show you a little video clip. Many of you may have seen this. It's produced by an Australian group, just showing one snapshot of how alcohol works on the central nervous system, particularly in the developing brain.
Alcohol enters the body and ends up in the stomach, at which point about 20% is absorbed immediately, and the other 80% is absorbed in the small intestine. The heart then pumps the absorbed alcohol to every part of the body, including the central nervous system, which consists of the brain and spinal cord, and it gets to the brain really fast. So that's why even after just one drink, you can feel lightheaded or relaxed. Alcohol acts primarily on the nerve cells within the brain and interferes with communication between nerve cells and all other cells, slowing everything down. And that's why when we drink even a little, we experience the effects of alcohol on our emotions, judgment, balance, memory, speech, and anger levels, just to name a few. Did you know that your brain is still developing until you're around 20 to 25? So we need to be really careful because alcohol can do some irreversible damage to various parts of our brains. For example,
So again, just to labour that, most of us know that, but now we know from the evidence that's landing in the public square that the brain is still developing for men up to the age of 32. So, and of course, we know that from, again, science, pretty much 98% of all addictions or the development of addictions or dependencies happen when substances before the age of 30. So again, the evidence is very clear that best practice, particularly for the developing brain, is abstinence. And that is one of the most remarkable protective factors going. I just want to quickly introduce to you a remarkable colleague, Professor John Toumbourou of Deakin University. And as you've heard, he's Cressida, Cressida, are you
Yes.
there? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So do you want to do that official bio or do you want me to do that?
You can do it as well if you have it prepared.
No, you can do it. I'd like you to do it because I think you'll do a much better job. And John's a friend of mine, so I'm a bit biased.
All right, then I'm happy to do so. I would like to introduce our second speaker, who is the chair in health psychology with the School of Psychology at Deakin University. He's the co-leader of intervention sciences with the SEED Life Course Research Center and a prominent social advocate in areas related to child and adolescents' mental health promotion and the prevention of alcohol and drug problems. John, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Erin. It's a great privilege to be here in presenting, and we're very keen to be sharing with you this new paper, which really provides a vision of how we can address the alcohol and drug problem at a whole nation level and internationally. So it's quite an ambitious work that we're outlining for you today. So my good colleague Shane there will help guide us through. But the questions we're asking when we wrote this paper were these ones. So the first one is one that does concern the national picture. What is the most effective models to reduce alcohol and drug use problems across large populations? You'll read in the paper that I led a Lancet publication on this in 2007, where we're asking this very question. And in this paper, we return to that same question and review how well we answered it in the Lancet publication in the 2007. The next point here in the questions is that how can we maximize the integrated contribution of prevention, regulation, and treatment? As Shane was saying earlier, if we can really get these three areas to work together, what we're going to experience is a fast tracking of efforts to try to reduce the alcohol and drug problems across the world. And so this is what this paper is talking about. Imagine in your own community how much better things would be if these three areas worked together. Next overhead. Thank you. And so some of the key answers to these questions are that adolescent alcohol and drug use prevention has been effective. It's actually one of the areas where we've seen great gains made. And initially that happened in the USA in the 1980s. And more recently in the 1990s, we were able to mirror those successes in Australia. Other nations, including parts of Europe, have also followed suit using the prevention models, and they've achieved large abstinent populations of adolescents. But now we're finding in Australia, and it has happened in the US as well, that lifestyle habit in the adolescents continues into adulthood. And now for the first time in our nation of Australia, we are seeing reductions in alcohol use, and they can be tracked back to this lifestyle change that started with the adolescents, and it started deliberately by bringing in prevention programs into that age group. The next point here in the answers is that from this, our paper then value adds by integrating these models. So we seek to integrate these successes. There's still a lot of work to do with industry regulation. We know that if we can protect our young, which we've been able to do, then that does open the way to try and value add. Regulation is quite acceptable in some areas, such as regulating the tobacco industry, but at this stage, it's off leash for a lot of other substances, alcohol, and now we see cannabis. An area that's really neglected in our country, for some of the reasons that Shane articulated, is that we're really not going deeply enough into abstinence-based recovery treatment. So we have many people who continue throughout their child rearing days and into their adult life with a lingering problem of addiction because it has never really they've never really been given the resources to fully recover. And this is accepted practice. In fact, the whole idea of living your life on pharmacotherapies is now widespread as the so-called evidence-based practice. So we critique this and question this. We think this is wrong. It's a failure to invest in effective treatment. And so if you read our paper, you'll see that we don't agree with this idea that people need to live their lives on pharmacotherapies for substances. So going on then, into the next overhead. Our central argument is that currently substance use systems are not integrated sufficiently around the successes we've had with prevention. We argue for a system-wide emphasis on promoting youth abstinence to maximize public health benefits. So that's our central argument, which you can read in our paper. Adolescent prevention works and is popular. So our evaluations from Australia show that we can reduce adolescent substance use by 10% per year using current technology, such as the Communities That Care model. So this model is available internationally, and we've used it in Australia with very great success. So every nation could be using this to get those sorts of changes in the adolescent populations. Going on to the next point. There is public support. We shouldn't see, as we often think, that there won't be support, that the public will be against us. That's not true. There is that support to regulate tobacco. There is support for reasonable alcohol regulation and for cannabis industries to protect adolescents, even though it seems at the moment that we don't have that consensus for other parts of our population. But we'll deal with that matter as we move on today. So our next point is that adolescents that do not use substances tend to develop adult habits of abstinence, which is exactly the point that we're hearing about. It becomes a lifelong habit if we can actually protect that adolescent population, which we can. There's going to be this flow-on effect into adulthood. So these are the arguments for adolescent prevention. So moving on then to our next overhead. We're not arguing against harm reduction. Sensible harm reduction is something we support. But however, this is our key point. It should not undermine prevention. So harm reduction programs such as roadside alcohol and drug testing, they're effective and they support prevention. We don't have an argument with them. Going on to our next point. Some harm reduction programs normalize drug use and undermine adolescent prevention, and they're the types of programs we think need to be questioned, and there needs to be some contention around them. We have some very classic examples which we report in our paper. So tobacco vaping was introduced as a harm reduction strategy to address a group of people in the rump of reducing tobacco who were seen to need some additional support. There's no argument for that small group. There have been advantages for vaping. However, because of its the way that it's been marketed and the lack of regulation around it, we've found that it's become now a new addiction for many young people that have not ever had any substance use. And so it really was an example of the types of harm reduction practices that have undermined prevention. Similarly, many parents still think that they can actually prevent alcohol problems by supervising their children's alcohol use. It's so-called European model. That's been completely debunked. That does not do that. For the reason that any amount of alcohol for a young person actually immediately changes the brain and leads to dose tolerance and neuroadaptation to mean that you will then need greater amounts to have the same effect. It's a big mistake to introduce alcohol through the adolescent years. And so that harm reduction practices that was brought in the 90s in Australia is now on the run as something that was a bad mistake. And so too, cannabis legalization is brought in as a so-called harm reduction strategy. It's a terribly destructive mistake. And this is another area that we debunk in this paper. So moving on. I think that it's probably not contentious that abstinent parents are the foundational for prevention. We agree that parent substance use is bad for children. Going on to the next point. Hence, alcohol and drug policy should maximize parent abstinence. So this is, I think that there would be a lot of agreement with this. The next point is abstinence in adolescence is necessary for parents to grow up abstinent. If we think of the idea that you grow into adulthood abstinent, well, if you're adolescent and abstinent, then it's much more likely. It's important that you are abstinent in adolescence if you want to grow up and be an abstinent parent. However, it's not sufficient. We also need to regulate industries to reduce the number of young adults that use substances if we want to protect children from parent substance use. So this is another important policy target. We do not want the current trend for more and more children to be growing up with parents who are using substances. And it's a very important issue. Moving on to our next point. Abstinence-based treatment is best for prevention. Abstinence treatments are the consensus for tobacco. Moving on to our next point. Abstinent treatments are actually superior and cost-effective for alcohol based on a Cochrane review that we present. The Cochrane reviews are to be trusted. They show this very strong evidence. Yet abstinent treatments are rare for opioids, despite sound evidence that they are achievable in the areas such as therapeutic communities and the 12-step programs. Moving on. Prioritizing abstinence-based recovery is very important. The recovery in therapeutic community and 12-step models is feasible and cost-effective, but not very widely used, not used enough. Moving on. These models are superior for personal growth and social capital. So the alternative models don't prioritize these two really central issues for our collective futures. Harm reduction models proliferate in opioid pharmacotherapy treatment and the snake oil cannabis medicines that are being pushed at us by the industries, but really have absolutely no therapeutic rigorous trials to demonstrate that they have benefits. And so we're seeing again, we're being hoodwinked. We're having lies told to us about these so-called cannabis medicines. Moving on. You may say that we're dreaming. And so one of the things we're doing today is we're trying to make clear to you that we're not. So if we were to tax substance industries to pay for adolescent prevention, conditional on achieving 10% more abstinence per year, we see that as a reasonable thing to do to the industries. We would start to see a great deal of funding coming for the prevention movement. Our next point is that investing in policies and programs to measurably increase the number of abstinent parents we think is necessary, although not on the policy radar yet. This is something we'll push for. We want to evaluate harm reduction and treatment programs to ensure their compatibility with abstinence-based prevention. This will be something you'll hear a lot more from us on. And we want to increase investment in recovery-based treatment models and evaluate their benefits in personal growth and social capital. So let's say just very bluntly that if we were to actually invest in these areas using the framework we're presenting here, by actually repurposing monies that are being made from us by the tobacco, alcohol, cannabis industries and encourage and support full recovery, allow people to flourish and thrive in their humanity, then what we're going to see is more people supportive of prevention, and we're going to see a massive change in our overall well-being internationally. So this is what we will be pushing for based on this paper. So moving on.
Thank you, John.
Thank you very much.
What we're going to do, yeah, I'll jump in there. Can everyone hear me? I'm assuming it's okay, Cressida?
Yes,
Am
I
I?
can hear you.
Oh, perfect. I just wasn't sure if you muted me. Thanks, John. That was fantastic. What we want to do now is after that brief, again, we're not going to be just here parroting the entire paper. You've got access to that. We encourage you to spelunk its riches and draw out of it so much of the research that is in there, particularly around the whole area of, as John's talked about, mental health and social well-being and social capital. But right here, right now, we're going to give an opportunity for those to ask questions about what you've just heard so far. And then we're going to do a little bit more. Then we're going to have another video and then some more Q&A. But does anybody have any questions for us at this stage about what you've heard so far? And I'll let Cressida moderate that.
Yes, happy to do so. So if you have a question, you can either unmute yourself or you can pose your question in the chat. In the meantime, just because
I have a question.
Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I have a question. First of all, thank you very much for this very important seminar. And it goes very fast for me, but I have a question for prevention that has been effective in USA and Australia for the alcohol prevention. In the Netherlands and even in Sweden, where I'm best know that the alcohol abuse has gone down, but the other drugs has coming up, and prevention is the key. The problem is, for instance, in the Netherlands, that, and even Australia and the US, that parents are allowed to use and buy drugs in coffee shops, in other, facilities. And how do we deal with this? I mean, this is politics. And on one hand, you do a lot for prevention. On the other hand, the parents or the adults can use drugs as much as they want. It doesn't fit. My question is, how do you deal with this?
Yeah, good question, Renee. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'll start and then Shane may have some further words. What you're saying is exactly the point we're making, is that we really need to be able to change the whole population. But the way to do that is to start with the protection of adolescents, translate that into young adults, and then continue to push public health messages that will lead to older people also accepting these messages. So there's a lot of hope around the possibility that we could go further with the abstinence models in the tobacco area and also with alcohol. The World Health Organization has now stated quite clearly that the healthiest option if you want to reduce your risk of cancer is no alcohol use. And this, as you get older, I'm now approaching 70, so I can tell you that in my demographic, people are listening to messages around the need to cut back on alcohol. So we can value add to that. I think in the illicit space, the cannabis is a very good example. We've got a huge amount of work to do to battle at the moment a lot of the tobacco industry who've gotten into that area, and they're trying to sell us something that's terribly harmful. And so this is something that we will oppose. And in Australia, we're at the vanguard of the battle. But I can tell you that we're going to win this battle in the end. At the moment, there's going to be a lot of small areas that where we need to fight. But absolutely, it is wrong to be liberalising cannabis. It's an incredibly harmful drug. So that's my view of it. I totally agree with what you're saying, Renee. And we need to work together to encourage abstinence. There's no real safety in using cannabis. It's not been medicinally proven. And if you do look at those that are medicines, the doses are tiny. What's being offered in the marketplace is nothing like that. And the amounts are definitely going to cause cellular changes that lead to cancer and birth defects. So they're very much against what we're in favour of.
Yeah, thanks, John. I think, Renee, it's all about shifting narratives. Hence the reason that and I do apologise for the pace too while I'm at it. I just want to again acknowledge and laud those who are multilingual. Us lazy English speakers aren't. So thank you for your patience with us. I'll try and measure my pace a bit more. But Renee, yes, changing the narrative is part of the agenda. And what we're doing in part of this webinar, and involvement with other groups, bringing collaborative engagements with different groups like OVM, Drug Free Australia, for example, Deakin University, International Society for Prevention Research. All these different groups are starting to work collaboratively and shaping a new narrative. And that narrative has one of the central components of abstinence, which was, as I said at the start of this, 10 years ago was mocked. Literally, I was mocked. Our organisation was marginalised because we promoted abstinence. Now we have got the ear of some key players and stakeholders. Now we're starting to see that the World Health Organization and publications like The Lancet have come out, and some of them quite reluctantly, I might add, and have just said, you know what, we need to get the substances out of our system. Unfortunately, the political will that's needed for this is going to have to come from a narrative shift. It will happen, and it will happen with strategic engagements with strategic actors in the sector. So let's keep doing that. I think just to encourage you in that space, because I know the work that you do, Renee, and others do, it can seem like you just run over by the sector, run over by the propaganda machines that are so well funded. And the harm reductionists, the pro-drug activists, and this is, I want everyone today to hear this clearly, and I want to enunciate it, and I want to articulate it in a way that again affirms the very important space for legitimate harm reduction. I am not, and John is not, saying that legitimate harm reduction practices do not have a place in policy and on the continuum of care, as long as that continuum of care is about bringing people back to best practice, which is always abstinence. There is no such thing as healthy use of substances for anybody, let alone the developing brain. But be careful. I'm going to get on my little rant here. Be careful of the pro-drug activists that come underneath genuine harm reduction policies and hijack them. What they do, and I've watched this for 12 years now, and I actively, and John now is actively pushing back against these actors, because what they do is they come in with, oh yes, harm reduction, and they talk compassion, they talk all the nice words which we should talk and we need to bring to the public square. But then what they do is they use harm reduction to normalize drug use. And all of a sudden, the gold standard for drug policy is no longer abstinence, no longer prevention, no longer denying uptake, no longer recovering from drug use. The gold standard is now drug use is normal and we need to manage the damage. So I just want to make that crystal clear that that's part of the narrative shift. You have to identify in your settings where harm reduction is being hijacked and retasked to normalize substance use. So, but we keep banging the drum, Renee. We keep building the collaborations and building the consensus, and things are shifting as we're seeing at the moment. John and I are just part of a bigger group that are seeing this shift nationally and internationally. So thank you for the question. Anybody else?
I just have a comment on it. Thank you. We have to take back the word harm reduction and explain what we meant and ask them what they mean with it. And the only thing what we can do now is have hope and give the people hope and believe that you can make the change. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee.
I have a question.
Certainly, Abdul.
Yeah, abstinent parents are foundational for prevention. My question is, how can we strengthen family and community norms so that abstinences become the expected standard for children and adolescents?
John,
That's my question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Look,
Do you want to start off, John?
if you look at our paper, which is now available to you in the chat, what you'll see there is a lot of evidence that this can be achieved. So the first thing is that we have to use evidence-based practices, and they are articulated in our paper to explain some of those. But the other thing we have to do is all work together to make clear that the policy objectives we want are the ones listed in our paper. So you'll read in our paper we present a table that has indicators for success, and so we need to hold our government accountable to achieve these. The first one is to continually reduce the number of adolescents that use substances. That's easily counted from surveys. If it ever goes up, politicians have absolutely let us down, and we need to make that clear. That will lead to reductions in young adults, and the number of young adults using needs to come down. Young adults are parents, and that will lead to reductions in the number of parents using substances. We cannot allow substance use in the young adult period. At the moment, many policies say that drugs, alcohol and cannabis are legal after people reach the young adult period. That's not right. We should be making it much clearer that if you are in the conception period, pregnant, raising children, we need to absolutely emphasize the importance that those tasks should not have drug involvement. Tobacco shouldn't be there. Alcohol, cannabis shouldn't be there. And we need to hold ourselves accountable to achieve those objectives. That will lead to the abstinence movement becoming much more normalized. And this is what we're arguing for. We present what might seem a difficult thing to achieve, but I absolutely tell you it is achievable, and it needs to become our absolute convention. So this paper presents to you a roadmap for the future that is strongly evidence-based and will help you in each of your nations to solve the problems that you face.
Yeah, thank you, John. And Abdul,
Thank you very much.
Difficulties. Yeah, Abdul, yeah, certainly to add to that, I think one of the real factors is when you have adults that have either immersed, we're talking maybe 40 plus years of age with children who are well and truly entrenched in a substance using usually legal drugs of tobacco and alcohol, but maybe illicit drugs as well. It's what do we do about helping them? What John's saying is moving forward. We're building in a new generation for that moving forward abstinence, but that group, that demographic that's still entrenched, it's determining and helping them see what are some of the tethering points, the anchor points for their engagement, and helping them actually find an exit strategy from that space. Some of the things that are quite common, you may not have them in your location. We have things in Australia for alcohol, particularly like October, sober in October, dry in July, Feb fast. So there's a period where entire communities come around alcohol, the issue of alcohol. So we're going to not drink for the month of February or October or July. And during that time, we have activities and engagement processes that help those who are consistently, annually, daily engaged in substance use disconnect from the engagement, and more importantly, connect with others who are trying to find a better way to live without substances. So those kind of mechanisms, the policy frameworks are important, the lobbying advocacy of government important, but also these community-based drivers and promotions that give alternatives, not just a challenge of the status quo, but an alternative to it, a key issue. So engaging in those as well is very helpful, Abdul. We see that shifts that demographic that are caught a lot more consistently. And when kids see their parents doing that, and the parents see their emerging teenagers not drinking, all of that begins to coalesce around a movement away from use towards abstinence. So hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you, Shane. I see, Sarah, you have a question? You unmuted yourself. Okay. Otherwise, we
All right, we'll move on.
continue with the questions, but I would like to first also introduce another best practice of, prioritizing abstinence-based. So these questions are really great. We have one more presentation from our dear colleagues from the US. And we will be hearing from the Institute for Behavior and Health, which is a nonprofit organization in Washington, D.C., that identifies and promotes new ideas to reduce illegal drug use and improve substance use prevention and addiction treatment. And joining us today, and she pre-recorded because in the US it's currently like 4 a.m., is Corinne Shea, who joined the IBH in 2007 and now serves as the executive director. And she will be talking about the youth prevention initiative. They have one choice. I'll just quickly share my screen. Let me know if you don't hear anything.
Hello, everyone. Many thanks to WFAD for this incredible opportunity to speak with all of you today. My name is Corinne Shea, and I'm Executive Director of the Institute for Behavior and Health. IBH was founded by Dr. Robert DuPont, who served as the first director of NIDA and second White House drug czar. In addition to being IBH president, he is also a very proud member of the WFAD Board of Directors. I was asked today to present our organization's approach to substance use prevention because it is well aligned with the commentary discussed. Simply put, IBH is working to change the way we think about youth substance use, setting a clear public health standard for prevention. The goal is one choice: no use of any alcohol, nicotine, cannabis, or other drugs by youth under age 21 for reasons of health. Now, when someone asks why not age 25, because we know the brain develops until the mid-20s, I push back and say we say 21 specifically because that is the legal age for alcohol and nicotine in the US, as well as in an increasing number of states, THC products. Now, to us, this is a standard like other health standards, whether it's seatbelts, helmets, eating healthy foods, exercising. We know not everyone does all of these things all of the time, but it doesn't change the standard for health. And also, when we know better, we do better. We understand the developing brain is uniquely vulnerable to substance use, which really makes prevention a form of brain protection. Substance use disorder is often thought of as an adult problem, but we now understand addiction to be a pediatric onset disorder. The vast majority of adults with an SUD started using substances before age 18, and often well before that time. And while not everyone who uses substances will go on to develop a substance use disorder, we do know that underage substance use increases the risk for many adverse outcomes, not just addiction. Special thanks to the Partnership to End Addiction for this powerful slide. You can see here, though, that when substance use is initiated before the age of 18, there is about a 25% chance of developing an SUD. If that initiation to substance use is pushed back to after 21, the risk of developing addiction drops to about 4%. So keep in mind that the most common substances used by young people are nicotine, alcohol, and cannabis. Now, in any discussion of prevention, IBH highlights the fact that substance use and mental health challenges are bidirectional, where one tends to make the other worse. Mental health challenges can increase the risk of substance use, but substance use can also increase the risk of developing a mental health challenge. And while there are many studies that make this connection, one that I've highlighted here is an analysis of survey data from over 15,000 American high school students that found that alcohol, cannabis, and nicotine were each individually associated with increased mental health symptoms. So this is key when we think about prevention in general. It's not any one substance that can inversely impact youth mental health. In our own research at IBH, we analyzed data from the National Survey on Drug Use and Health. We used a nationally representative sample of youth between the ages of 12 and 17, and we found that when a young person uses one substance, whether it be alcohol, nicotine, or cannabis, they were at increased risk of using the other two substances and other illicit drugs. The inverse, of course, was also true. Not using one substance decreased the risk of using the others. So for youth, all substance use is connected. It's one of the reasons why we call our prevention work One Choice. This graph uses updated data since our initial publication. Here on the left-hand side are youth who reported no past month cannabis use. On the right-hand side are their peers who reported some use of cannabis in the last 30 days. So compared to their non-cannabis using peers, those who did use cannabis, here on the right, In the past month, we're 9.8 times more likely to use alcohol, 15.5 times more likely to report binge drinking or heavy alcohol use, 29.5 times more likely to use tobacco products or to vape nicotine, and 12 times more likely to use other illicit drugs. The same was true for but when we looked at nicotine and alcohol, they're all connected. Now, the final piece of our one-choice approach to prevention is highlighting the growing percentage of youth in the US who are not using any substances. So this graph shows our analyses of the nationally representative Monitoring the Future study. We looked at non-use going back to 1976 among 12th graders. So this is no use of any alcohol, cigarettes, marijuana, or other illicit drugs. And then in 2015, we added non-use of vaping nicotine, marijuana, and flavoring. The blue line on the bottom shows that lifetime non-use has increased from a low of less than 3% in 1983 to nearly 36% today. But to me, more exciting is the purple line above. This is 12th graders who reported no use of any substances in the past month. And in 1983, only 16% of 12th graders hadn't used any substance in the last 30 days, and now it's nearly 61%. So most teens are not using substances. That's something to celebrate. As I start to wrap up, I want to share a quote from the American Academy of Pediatrics, just to show that it makes it very clear in its policy statement on screening, brief intervention, and referral to treatment that for youth, non-use is the health standard. And in my mind, this is a message that we can carry beyond healthcare professionals and into our culture, again, as a standard to protect the developing brain. This is the spectrum of mental, emotional, and behavioral interventions. You may ask, okay, so where does one choice as a primary prevention message fall? And what about harm reduction or risk management for youth? We've added in here, above the continuum, primary prevention, harm reduction, and recovery support. And you'll see that each of those are multicolored because they fall across several overlapping areas on the continuum. I'd like to highlight that health promotion lives across the entire spectrum, not just the green areas, but also along the bottom. And in our mind, one choice is a primary prevention message, but like health promotion, it extends across the spectrum. It is in the interest of youth health, no matter where they fall in the continuum, that they not use substances. So the goal of primary prevention is to help young people choose to continue not to use or to stop casual use to protect and promote their health. In this way, one choice of non-use is an appropriate prevention message for any young audience, particularly when we think about if we don't know substance use history or risk factors of that audience. And with that, we have to remember that language is important. We need to make sure that when speaking to a general audience of young people, that our language is not stigmatizing youth who use and may need help for their substance use, but also at the same time, our language does not encourage or promote substance use. Research is clear that when there is permission to use, when that's granted by adults, young people are more likely to use, which is why we would never lead with a harm reduction message to a general audience of young people for whom we don't know their substance use history or risk factors. So when we think about young people, there are some who will fall into different categories. There may be some who fall into this blue bubble, those who are passionate and very confident in their non-use of substances. They might be a part of prevention clubs or activities in their community. There's another smaller group of young people who fall into that orange bubble, who engage in high-risk substance use behaviors. That group might be a group for whom harm reduction interventions would be appropriate. But then there's this larger group of everybody else. They may or may not have tried substances. Again, alcohol, nicotine, and cannabis are the most widely available, the most commonly used. But there are also a lot of young people who may not know the risks of using those substances. We do know, though, that there is a large perception gap between the number of youth who actually use and the number that everyone thinks are using. So we don't want to expand that perception gap by implying that most or all kids use. That can contribute to positive beliefs about substance use and even create risk of increased use. So we can positively influence each of these groups of young people by delivering the right message to the right audience by the right messenger. So we all have a role to play in promoting youth mental health and substance use prevention. We want to break down silos. We want to emphasize that substance use and mental health challenges are connected. We can think about substance use prevention as mental health self-care. And again, no matter what the substance, for teens, substance use is connected. We want to support that comprehensive public health message that normalizes substance non-use for young people and embrace and not stigmatize young people who need support for substance use or mental health challenges. And finally, underscoring we need to match the right prevention message to the right audience and given by the right messenger. So thank you very much for this opportunity. I hope you'll find out more about One Choice at onechoiceprevention.org.
Thank you, Corinne. It's even though she's not here, we still thank her very much. We're here for the last 4 minutes of the webinar. So if anyone has one last question, or if maybe Shane or John, you would want to add some final words to this.
Just wanted to let John finish up, and I just wanted to say thank you again for being here. Is the chat live, Cressida? I wanted to add something in there. Seems to be shut down.
Yes, you can add.
The chat disabled. Sorry.
Oh.
The key issue point there is, and again, I love what Corinne was saying, and we've engaged closely with the IBH. They're a great group, and it's about language, about engagement. And one of the things about narrative shift is about crafting a narrative that can be heard by multi-layered audiences. And we've spent a lot of time doing that, not to bang our drum or toot our horn. This is something that we've spent a lot of time doing because Australia is a very difficult space, and a lot of cynicism, a lot of peer pressure in place. So crafting those messages are important. One of those is called the Humpty Dumpty Dilemma Project, which is free to use. But it's always a lot of things you can mine from that. But one of the key issues here is, again, developing a proactive narrative that promotes abstinence, that promotes demand reduction, that promotes a stepping away from, not a stepping into, and challenging the existing permission models, which have many flavors, and making sure those permission models are called out for what they are. Again, John, I'll leave you to have the last word.
Just to thank everybody for their attendance. I hope that we have been able to make you more confident around some of the key messages that we're presenting today. Certainly, I just want to reiterate the success we're having with, I think we've heard that very clearly, that the young people who are our future are taking on board the idea that substance use does not need to be their lifestyle. And this is a change that's occurring in many countries. So I think that I would very much encourage the involvement of young people in the efforts to try to understand some of the ways in which we're suggesting that there can be further efforts to regulate industries that are harmful and that are likely to increase problems, and also to tax them so that that funds can be used for prevention. One of the key things we've heard today is people concerned about adults that are using, but recovery is possible. And recovery needs to be the new jobs and skills of the future. We need investment in order to go deeper with recovery so people can overcome their trauma, overcome the difficulties had through their life. They can find an economic future, they can find homes, and this needs to be the new economy that we all support. So thank you, and I hope we encourage you as well.
Thank you so much for these wonderful final words. And exactly at an hour later, we finalized this webinar. And thank you again to our amazing speakers to presenting the commentary today. And thank you for all the participants for joining us today. We will be sharing out the recordings via email. And if there's any additional questions, feel free to share via
PowerPoints
email.
as well. If they want, people want the PowerPoints, they can have them as well.
Exactly. So if you want the PowerPoints, please let us know via email. And we look forward to meeting you again at a future webinar. And for now, wishing you a wonderful week ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.